It's really important to have a really good sense of quadratic factoring. Okay, so I've put a couple links in here to practice some quadratic factoring, but that's very important that you have a very strong sense of quadratic factoring. Otherwise, we make things much harder for ourselves when we're dealing with polynomials of higher powers. So when we look at polynomial functions, we've already looked at polynomials before. We started off with linear functions. Okay, that's a degree 1 polynomial because the power on the x is actually power 1. So that's where the degree comes from. So it's called the degree 1 because it's power 1. Then we moved on to quadratics in grade 11. Okay, it's called the second degree because of that power 2. And so we're very familiar with the first two. So all we're really doing is extending the same ideas to a degree 3 or power 3, a power 4, power 5, etc. Okay, and as we increase the powers, the degrees, the naming of it just follows the power as the degree. So the degree is important because the degree actually tells us what kind of shape the function could have. So we know what a linear function looks like. So it has a straight line, okay, and a quadratic function looks like this. And the degree tells us that we have one degree has this kind of one arm. A quadratic has these two arms. I'm going to call these arms, but these two sections here. And what's important about them is that they also tell us the number of possible roots. Okay, so it's important the possible roots. So this line tells us we could have one root. This curve here tells us we could possibly have two. Now notice that we don't have two here, we have 0. But it could possibly have 2, because this graph could have been shifted down. You could have 2 roots. So the degree is telling us something about the shape, which then tells us how many possible roots that we could have. So when we talk about a third degree polynomial, a third degree polynomial looks like this. It has another bend in it. It's got 1, 2, 3 arms. Okay, so power 3 could possibly have 3 arms like this. Then that shape indicates the number of possible roots that we could have. So we could have possibly 3 roots because of the shape of this graph. Now, when we actually look at the graph, it only actually crosses the x-axis once, and these don't cross the x-axis, so these are what we call imaginary roots, and I'll explain those a little bit later. But the degree tells us the possible shape, and the possible shape tells us the number of possible zeros. So fourth degree can have this W shape. And having this W shape, well, in this case here, you could have up to a maximum of 4 solutions along the x-axis. In this case, we actually do have 4 solutions along the x-axis. So the degree tells us something about the degree comes from the power. The degree tells us something about the shape. And the shape tells us something about how many possible solutions we have or how many possible zeros we have. And in the end, the zeros are really actually what we're really interested in.